The ocean is an enigma, a boundless expanse where the human mind struggles to comprehend the depths that swallow light and harbor entities beyond imagination. This is no mere tale of speculation, but a harrowing chronicle of events that transpired on June 20th, 2025, beneath the crushing weight of the abyssal sea, where Maya, a researcher aboard a submerged habitat, bore witness to a nightmare that began with a piercing alarm at 3:47 a.m. and culminated in a confrontation with a terror so profound it reshaped my understanding of existence. This documentary, woven from raw transcripts, fragmented memories, and the echoes of loss, plunges you into a realm where science collides with the grotesque. Join me as I recount the sudden death of my colleague Zara, the grotesque metamorphosis that consumed her, and the awakening of a sentient force from the ocean's darkest recesses. The air hums with tension. The water presses with an unseen weight. Dare you descend with me into this abyss? Can your resolve withstand the chilling truths that lurk below? Or will you question the safety of your own shadowed corners? The night of June 19th, 2025, draped itself over me like a heavy shroud, my sleep a restless dance between the habitat's ceaseless hum, life support systems whirring, metal groaning under the ocean's relentless pressure, and fragmented dreams of vast, uncharted waters. At 3:47 a.m., a blaring alarm sliced through this fragile veil, its shrill cry yanking me from the depths of slumber. My eyes snapped open, disoriented, adjusting to the dim red emergency lighting that bathed my cramped quarters in a blood-like glow. The bedside chrono blinked its soft red digits. 3:47. A silent sentinel marking the moment my world fractured. A computerized voice, devoid of emotion, droned, "Warning! Life support malfunction detected in Sector B. Room 204. Room 204. Zara's room. My heart seized, a cold dread pooling in my gut like spilled ink as I catapulted from the bunk. The metal floor bit into my bare feet with an icy sting, each step a jolt as I lunged for my researcher suit, the insulated fabric crackling as I wrestled it over my trembling limbs. The zipper snagged, my fingers fumbling in a panic-fueled haze, the suit's cold embrace clinging to my skin like a second, suffocating skin. The habitat's narrow corridors, usually a familiar labyrinth of steel and shadow, streaked past me in a blur as I sprinted toward Zara's quarters. The emergency lights cast elongated, claw-like shadows that writhed along the walls, their jagged forms seeming to reach for my ankles, threatening to ensnare me with every hurried step. "Zara!" I shouted, my voice reverberating off the metal confines, raw with desperation and fear. I pounded on her door, the sound a frantic tattoo against the oppressive silence, each strike a plea for response. None came. The keypad beside it glowed a defiant red, signaling a sealed lock. Frustration boiled within me as I stabbed at the override code, the seconds stretching into an agonizing eternity, my breath hitching with each futile press. Finally, the door hissed open with a pneumatic sigh, releasing a wave of pressure that carried with it an assault on my senses. A pungent odor struck me, ozone sharp and biting, laced with a metallic tang that clawed at my throat with shocking ferocity. I staggered into the room, my vision swimming as my eyes darted wildly. "Zara!" I croaked, my voice breaking under the weight of dread. There she was, slumped in her chair at the console, her spiky blonde hair matted with sweat and plastered to her forehead, a thin trickle of crimson blood seeping from one nostril, stark and vivid against her deathly pale complexion. "No, no, no, no," I muttered, the words tumbling out in a frantic mantra as I rushed around the desk to her side. I dropped to my knees, crouching beside her, my trembling fingers pressing against her neck, searching for the faintest pulse. Nothing. A guttural growl escaped me, raw and primal, as I dragged her limp form to the floor, wincing at the sickening thud of her head sagging backward, the sound reverberating in my skull. Pushing aside the nausea clawing at my throat, I summoned my training, beginning chest compressions with a loud, rhythmic count. 1, 2, 3, 4. "Come on, Zara, stay with me." My hands pressed down with desperate force, sweat beading on my brow, each compression a silent prayer against the encroaching void. Time stretched into an endless abyss, my arms aching, my breath ragged, until the door hissed open again, a lifeline cutting through the despair. Dr. Emerson and Tom burst in, their faces grim, medical gear clutched in their hands. They moved with practiced efficiency, pushing me aside as they took over CPR, one prepping a defibrillator with swift, precise movements. I stumbled back, collapsing against the wall, my legs trembling beneath me, lungs burning from the exertion. The taste of Zara's lips lingered from the rescue breaths I'd given, a bitter residue of my futile attempt to save her. I watched, numb, as they worked, the high-pitched whine of the portable cardiac monitor slicing through the air, its unchanging tone a cruel confirmation of her stillness. After what felt like an eternity suspended in red-lit silence, Dr. Emerson looked up, his eyes meeting mine with a shake of his head. "I'm sorry, Maya. She's gone." The breath left me in a rush, my mouth opening in a silent scream, no words forming as my mind spiraled into a vortex of disbelief, grief, and guilt. The hours that followed dissolved into a haze. I found myself in the comms room, staring blankly at the screen as the surface relayed the official report, the chief medical officer's voice a distant murmur through the intercom. "Preliminary examination indicates a fatal embolism," he intoned, his words measured yet heavy. "It appears the pressure regulator in her chamber failed, resulting in rapid decompression. We believe—" "I am very sorry, Maya. We are initiating emergency protocols to get everyone back to the surface immediately." I nodded absently, the motion mechanical, my eyes drifting to the viewport beside me. Beyond the habitat's feeble lights lay a murky abyss, a void where the undersea ravine Zara and I had dreamed of exploring now loomed as a graveyard of hope. A hand on my shoulder jolted me from my trance. Tom, his somber expression a mirror to my own. "Maya, it's time to prepare to go up. Can you help me with copying the data?" I forced my mind to focus, rising with hands that trembled, catching my reflection in the black monitor screen. Long dark hair tangled and disheveled, blue eyes red-rimmed and swollen with exhaustion and a deeper, unnameable sorrow. There would be time to mourn later. For now, I had duties to fulfill for Zara, a final act of loyalty in this underwater tomb. An hour later, I stood in the sterile, antiseptic glow of the medical bay, the dull ache of Zara's death settling into a numb, pervasive pall that seemed to seep into my bones. The air carried the faint tang of disinfectant, a clinical counterpoint to the grief that weighed on my chest. Dr. Emerson approached, his ruddy face, usually a beacon of warmth, now drawn and etched with lines of concern, a tablet cradled in his hands. "Maya," he said quietly, his voice a gentle anchor, "I need to brief you on the protocol for handling a corpse in our unique situation." I nodded, steeling myself, my gaze flickering to the sheet-covered figure on the autopsy table. Even beneath the shroud, I could trace the outline of Zara's form, a silhouette that stirred memories of her vibrant presence, now stilled forever. "The pressure at this depth is too great to safely retrieve her without restraints," Dr. Emerson continued, his tone clinical yet tinged with empathy. He gestured to a large, armored container positioned against the wall, its thick, transparent viewports glinting under the harsh lights. The apparatus, more akin to a piece of scientific equipment than a casket, exuded an aura of cold functionality. "This will maintain pressure as we ascend," he explained. "We need to ensure it's properly secured, or we'll have a decompression incident on retrieval." I listened with intense focus, anchoring myself to the mechanics of his words to distance the raw emotion threatening to overwhelm me. Dr. Emerson had already walked me through the process, preparing Zara's body with meticulous care, securing the containment unit's internal array with straps and seals designed to withstand the ocean's crushing grip. With a steadying breath that did little to calm the tremor in my hands, I returned to the exam table, folding back the sheet with a reverence that felt inadequate. Zara's face, freshly washed and peaceful, her eyes closed as if in rest, belied the stillness of her chest. "I'm sorry, Zara," I whispered, my voice rising above the habitat's muted hum of life support, a confession to the void. With Dr. Emerson's steady assistance, I transferred her into the unit, the maglocks engaging with a series of metallic clunks that reverberated like a somber farewell, each sound a nail in the coffin of our shared dreams. "The sub is loaded in the bay and waiting," Dr. Emerson said, his voice pulling me back. "You need to transport her out to the designated spot outside the habitat. This is a precise task, Maya. Are you sure you can do it?" I met his gaze, my eyes locking with his, drawing strength from his quiet confidence. "I owe it to her," I replied, my voice steady despite the quake within. "She would have done the same for any of us." He nodded, a flicker of understanding passing between us. "Stay in constant communication," he instructed. "Report any issues immediately, even if they seem minor." I navigated the habitat's corridors with the float cart's repulsors humming softly beneath Zara's containment unit, the sound a low dirge against the silence that had settled over the station. The usual cacophony of shouts and banter was absent, replaced by a somber hush that pressed against my ears. Colleagues averted their eyes as I passed, their glances skittering away, unable to confront the stark reality of our loss. At the dock, the sub awaited, a compact vessel engineered for precision maneuvering at depth, its hull gleaming under the artificial lights. I strapped the crate in with meticulous care, double-checking each strap and clasp, a claustrophobic wave crashing over me as I settled into the pilot seat. The cockpit seemed to shrink around me, the walls closing in, and for a moment, I struggled to draw breath, the weight of the task pressing against my chest. "Bastoia, do you copy?" The radio crackled, breaking my reverie. "Roger that, Control. Departing now." The docking bay doors clattered open with a mechanical groan, revealing the dark ocean beyond, a void illuminated only by the sub's powerful lights slicing through the seascape. I maneuvered out with careful precision, mindful of the precious cargo I carried. This was no routine chore. It was a final act of honor, a farewell to the friend who had illuminated my underwater world. The designated site, a relatively flat expanse of seafloor near the habitat, emerged from the gloom. I settled the craft down with a gentle touch, deploying the robotic arm to lower Zara's canister with a reverence that belied the mechanical process. The unit's lights activated, casting a soft blue glow that bathed her resting place in an ethereal light, small and vulnerable yet strangely beautiful in its testament to human ingenuity against nature's might. I lingered in my seat, staring out at the grave, the vastness of the ocean floor stretching into infinity around it. "Control, this is Maya. Remains have been placed at the designated spot," I reported, my voice steady over the comms. "Roger that, Maya. Nice work. Return to base when you're ready," came the reply. I hesitated, unwilling to leave her so soon, and activated the external speakers. "Goodbye, Zara," I said, my voice echoing in the still waters. "I hope you're at peace here in the environment you loved." With a heavy sigh, I turned the submersible around, the weight of loss anchoring me as I began the return trip, each meter a step further from the friend I'd lost to the deep. Back at the habitat, I stood outside Zara's bedroom, a melancholy sigh escaping my lips as I crossed the threshold. The room, once a vibrant testament to her boundless energy, felt unnaturally quiet, the absence of her laughter a void that echoed in the sterile air. The head of the research group had tasked me with sorting her belongings, a duty I dreaded yet understood as a necessary closure. It felt like an intrusion, a violation of her privacy, yet I knew it was a ritual to honor her memory. The space was a chaotic monument to her brilliant, restless mind, towering stacks of books and papers teetering on every flat surface, white boards scrawled with complex equations and half-formed theories, bits of electronics in various states of disassembly scattered like relics of her curiosity. I moved deliberately through the room, picking up each item with care, deciding whether it should be sent to her family, retained by the research group, or discarded into the abyss of memory. My thoughts drifted to the past, to moments of Zara's exuberance when she unraveled a particularly vexing puzzle, her dark eyes alight with triumph, her laughter a melody in the underwater silence. A faint smile flickered across my lips as I brushed my fingers over a small potted plant on her desk, a hardy species she'd cultivated to study its adaptation to high-pressure environments, thriving even in her absence. a silent testament to her legacy. My gaze drifted to her diving gear, meticulously arranged in the corner. Her wetsuit hanging on a peg, the familiar scent of neoprene and seawater still faintly emanating from it, an olfactory echo of our countless dives together. I ran my fingers along the sleeve, memories flooding back of exploring the abyssal wonders side by side, her voice guiding me through the currents. Lifting her dive computer to stow it on its shelf, something caught my eye, a barely perceptible irregularity in the otherwise smooth surface of the case, so subtle it might have been overlooked by anyone not searching for it. I set the device aside, my curiosity piqued, and examined the case more closely, tracing the uneven edge with my fingertips. With a quiet click, a small panel swung open, revealing a tiny data chip nestled within. My hands trembled as I extracted it, a shiver of anticipation and dread coursing through me. What secrets had Zara hidden, and why had she concealed them within her own equipment? I inserted the chip into my tablet, my breath shallow as encrypted files materialized on the screen, their nonsensical letter and number combinations a cryptic code. The first file, an audio recording, crackled to life, Zara's voice emerging through the static. Frequency anomaly. Not natural. A knot formed in my stomach as I navigated to the next. A series of blurred, poorly focused images depicting dark, indistinct shapes in the murky water, their forms elusive yet menacing. The final file contained a long list of numbers that, at first glance, seemed random, but as I studied them, familiar patterns emerged. Coordinates, perhaps, or a cipher. What were you into, Zara? I wondered aloud, my voice a whisper in the empty room, confusion and concern coiling tightly in my gut. A sharp rap at the door shattered my reverie. Dr. Emerson, his concerned frown peering around the frame. Are you okay, Maya? Getting settled. I nodded, gesturing to the boxes beside me. Almost done. I'll head to the lab to compile data for upload. As I left, the chip burned in my pocket, a mystery demanding unraveling, a thread leading deeper into the unknown. The research lab greeted me with a sterile stillness, the digital clock on the wall reading 2:37 p.m., a stark reminder that less than 12 hours had passed since Zara's death, though it felt like days stretched into eternity. The usual hum of activity was absent, replaced by an eerie quiet broken only by the soft whir of computers, their blue glow casting an otherworldly light across the workstations. I dropped into my chair, the creak of the seat a minor protest against my weight, and set my mind to the task of backing up the data, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Yet, my thoughts kept drifting to the chip, a tantalizing enigma tucked into my pocket. Accessing the research database, I navigated the labyrinth of security protocols, the tactile feedback of each keystroke grounding my swirling emotions. Then, amidst the scrolling code, a duplication of implant data caught my eye, buried in a subfolder tagged with yesterday's date, hidden in an obscure sector of the file system. My gut tightened, a premonition of something sinister, as I double-clicked to open it. Within were a series of files, each tagged with a date and time, a digital timeline of Zara's final hours. I froze when I spotted the one corresponding to 3:47 a.m., her moment of death, and with trembling fingers, I double-clicked again. A waveform materialized on the screen, its peaks and valleys graphically representing a recorded audio, and I plugged in my headphones, wary of risking anyone overhearing. An uncomfortable chill settled in my gut as I hit the spacebar, Zara's tinny, warbling voice emerging through the static. Anomaly detected at 3:47. Frequency consistent with previous. Wait, something's wrong, the pressure. Her words cut off abruptly, replaced by a jagged burst of static that made me wince, the screen flashing the word embolism as the playback ended. She had recorded this moments before the alarm sounded. How had she known what was coming? The folder held a mosaic of disjointed snippets, sensor data pulsing with irregularities, audio recordings from the bridge, and other sectors of the habitat, sonar readings that defied explanation. I plotted the coordinates on an ocean floor chart, my hands steadying as a perfect ring formed around an uncharted seabed Zara had passionately advocated for us to survey. The sonar data revealed the typical undulations of the ocean floor, but overlaid with these bizarre, regular patterns, geometric shapes that suggested an intelligence, a design that mocked the randomness of nature. "This isn't just a malfunction," I murmured, my voice barely audible, unease blossoming into a full-fledged dread. What had Zara uncovered in her relentless pursuit of knowledge? A light touch on my shoulder startled me, and I hurried to minimize the open windows, my heart racing. Dr. Emerson's voice broke the tension. "How's the backup coming?" Going as expected. "Some corruption?" I lied, my voice strained as I met his gaze. He nodded, pleased. "Good work, Maya. Let me know if you need anything." As he walked out, I exhaled a long, shaky breath, my mind a whirlwind of speculation. I needed more time to review this data, to piece together the puzzle Zara had left behind, but not here, not with the risk of interruption. At 4:15 p.m., with the evening rotation thinning the lab's population, I made a silent decision to return later, under the cover of night when solitude would allow me to delve deeper. That evening, the lab transformed under the dim, blue-tinged illumination of the computer monitors, the space feeling intimate yet disconcertingly alien. The habitat's environmental systems hummed a muted dirge, their constant drone a stark contrast to Zara's absence, her loss a palpable void. I flexed my fingers over the keyboard, settling into my seat, the chair creaking softly, and accessed the hidden files I discovered earlier. My anticipation built with each keystroke as I followed Zara's digital breadcrumbs, each file revealing more of the intelligence she had secreted away. Then, a date caught my eye, July 20th, 2025, precisely 1 month ahead of the first recording, accompanied by a single, ominous word, implosion. I froze, my breath catching in my chest, the air thickening around me. What did it mean? Prediction? A warning? My mind whirled with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last, and I leaned closer to the terminal, willing more information to surface from the digital depths. Without warning, a muted sound from outside the habitat drew my attention, a low-frequency droning vibration, so soft it seemed to emanate from all directions at once, a pulse that resonated through the metal walls. I stood perfectly still, straining to hear more, my heart beginning to race. There it was again, a little louder, a rhythmic throb that set my teeth on edge. I keyed the communication panel, my voice taut. "Surface team, this is Maya. I'm receiving some odd sounds from outside the habitat. Can you check it?" The response was immediate, crackling over the speakers. "Negative, Maya. We're not seeing anything out of the ordinary here." I drummed my fingers on the console, nervousness coiling tighter. "Are you sure? It's very pronounced, almost like a pulsation." "No, Maya," came the voice again, now with a hint of irritation. "We are not observing anything out of the ordinary with our instrumentation. Continue with your assigned tasks." Frowning, I returned to the computer console, unease gnawing at me, the pulsating sound persisting and growing louder with each passing minute. I attempted to concentrate on Zara's reports, but the distraction was insurmountable, my growing anxiety a shadow that deepened with every throb. After another hour of this relentless pulsation, I could bear it no longer and keyed the comms again. "Surface team, the pulsations are intensifying. Something is definitely not right. I really think we should." The voice cut in with a tone of firm finality. "You have been briefed that there is nothing to investigate. Return to your room immediately. That is an order." I reeled back, the forcefulness of the command striking me like a physical blow, my gaze drifting to the monitor where the word implosion taunted me. What had Zara uncovered? And why was the surface team so adamant about silencing my concerns? The resonance outside grew louder, more intense, vibrating through the very structure of the habitat, and I clenched my fists, torn between obedience and an overwhelming need to uncover the truth. As I stood there, frozen in indecision, the feeling that our time was running out, mine, and all of us down here, grew inescapable. Unable to quell the gnawing questions that plagued me, I abandoned the lab and made my way to the dive prep room, the familiar scent of neoprene and seawater filling my senses, a bittersweet reminder of the countless dives I'd shared with Zara. The The shadows within the habitat seemed to lengthen under the night's embrace, the silence more oppressive, pressing against my eardrums with a weight that mirrored my dread. I retrieved my dive suit with trembling hands, the fabric cool against my skin as I donned it, fully aware that this act was a violation of regulations, a plunge into danger that could cost me my career or my life. But the unanswered questions surrounding Zara's death, her cryptic warnings encoded in the data chip, left me with no other choice. I had to investigate, to pierce the veil of ignorance that shrouded her fate. As I worked, my eyes fell upon the empty spot where Zara's gear had once rested, a twinge of emotion piercing my resolve, but I pushed it aside, focusing on the task. I checked and rechecked each seal and connection, the familiar weight of the oxygen tanks settling on my back as I had done hundreds, perhaps thousands of times before. Yet this dive was different, not an exploration, but a chase into the shadows of the unknown. With one last calming breath, I stepped into the airlock chamber, the rush of water into the compartment as the pressure equalized a sound that both soothed and terrified me. A mix of excitement and trepidation coursed through my veins as the outer door unlocked and swung open, revealing the inky blackness beyond. I hesitated for a moment, the gravity of my decision anchoring me, until Dr. Emerson's voice crackled urgently over my comms. "Maya, what are you doing? Return to the habitat immediately." I ignored him, kicking backward and away from the opening, plunging into the cold, hostile embrace of the open ocean. The chill of the water was familiar, yet now it felt more ominous, a living entity that resented my intrusion. The twin beams of my dive lights cut through the darkness, illuminating motes of detritus floating lazily in the current as I oriented myself, turning toward the enclosure that had housed Zara's remains. The strange vibrating sound I'd heard in the lab grew in intensity as I swam, pulsing through my body and setting my teeth on edge, a rhythm that seemed to emanate from everywhere at once. I searched for its source, my lights sweeping the murky depths, but found nothing tangible, only the vast expanse of shadowed water. Suddenly, a dark blur passed overhead, something massive and faster than any sea creature should be at these depths, its form a fleeting silhouette against the faint glow of bioluminescence. I spun around in the water, searching for the entity I instinctively knew had been freed from its prison. But there was nothing, only the endless void surrounding me. I moved forward cautiously, keeping my surroundings in sharp focus, the containment unit looming ahead as a monolithic shadow upon the seafloor. As I approached, I noticed dim, pulsing bioluminescent lines upon its surface, forming intricate patterns across its facings, markings that had not been present moments earlier. I examined them closer, my gloved hand hovering, recognizing their unnatural precision. A flicker of motion caught the corner of my eye, and I whirled around, but saw nothing. The prickling on my neck intensified, the uncomfortable feeling of being watched growing, my instincts screaming that I was on the brink of a revelation. "Hello? Is someone there?" I called out, my voice sounding small and muted in the vast expanse, swallowed by the water. Again, no response, but the vibration grew louder, more insistent, seeming to originate from within the storage container itself. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the airlock release, the weight of my decision pressing down. Whatever Zara had found, whatever had claimed her life, lay behind this door. As I prepared to step inside, I felt the gentle tug of the water current against me and thought I heard Zara's voice drift faintly to my ears. "Careful, Maya." I spun around abruptly, straining my eyes in search of the source, but found no sign of anyone in the shadowed waters. The feeling of being watched was almost overwhelming now, and my instincts told me I was very close to uncovering something momentous. My hands trembled as I keyed the airlock override, releasing the doorway and preparing to face whatever horrors awaited within Zara's containment unit. The vibrations that had permeated the habitat reached a fevered pitch as I entered, the bioluminescent lines flowing and pulsing across the unit's otherwise featureless bulkhead in an eerie glow that illuminated the darkened water. I hesitated a moment, my hand hovering near the airlock controls, feeling the weight of my choice, my chest heaving with a deep breath that fogged the inside of my mask briefly. Punching the access code, I waited as the circular hatch rotated and fell away, granting me entry into the containment unit proper. The interior was lit with a strange blue light from clusters of bioluminescent organisms encrusting the walls and machinery, and in that dim illumination, I beheld a scene that caused my heart to clench in my chest. Zara's body lay upon the examination table, but it was obscured by undulating masses that shifted and squirmed across her enshrouded flesh, disguising the once recognizable shape of the woman I had known. Her familiar features had been radically altered, grotesquely elongated and distorted by the pulsating masses, and I stepped closer, forcing myself to suppress the revulsion rising in my throat. In my closer examination, I realized with a shock what I was seeing. Beneath the veil of her skin, it was moving, pulsating, alive. Zara! I choked, barely recognizing my own shaking voice. What the hell is this? What's happened to you? With my gloved hand, I reached out, trembling and tentative toward her cloaked form, the pulsations increasing with the proximity of my hand as if aware of my presence. Without warning, the surface of the mass parted wetly, revealing a writhing knot of tendrils within, which uncoiled eagerly toward my hand. I jerked away in fright, my back slamming into one of the consoles behind me, the impact startling a cluster of the bioluminescent organisms into a flare that momentarily blinded me. When I could see again a moment later, the tendrils had settled back into their sheath, but the pulsating mass within Zara's chest quickened hungrily, a grotesque heartbeat in the silence. The comms crackled abruptly to life, making me jump. Maya, this is surface control. We're reading some very strange telemetry from the containment chamber. What's going on down there? I stammered, unable to tear my eyes away from the horrific sight before me. I'm in Zara's cell. She's not right. Her body, all I can see is something moving inside her. There was a brief pause before they responded, their tones suddenly sober. Maya, listen to me. You need to seal that cell and return to the habitat section immediately. Do you hear me? Seal the cell and return now. Their urgency snapped me back to reality, and I stepped backward from the table, keeping my gaze on the mutated form of Zara as I reached the airlock. A vicious tremor shook the unit, clattering the tools to the floor and causing the bioluminescent organisms to flare brighter, casting wild shadows across the walls. Maya, what's happening? We're not receiving any telemetry from the unit. I fought to key the airlock controls with trembling, fearful hands. I don't know. The tremors are very strong. I am sealing the unit now. The airlock door began to close, and in that last glimpse of Zara's desiccated body, I saw more of those strange growths spreading across her limbs. In that final moment, it seemed as if her eyes suddenly snapped open, fixing on me with a grotesque, wet sheen, before the door clanged shut, cutting off my view of the horrific scene within. Immediately, I recoiled from the outpost, using my air jets to propel myself as fast as my trembling arms and legs could manage back toward the habitat. That vibrating sound followed me through the water, growing more insistent with each stroke, a relentless pulse that seemed to chase me. On my way back, I panted into the comms. I think something's coming after me. I can feel it. Continue moving, Maya. We are preparing the Deccan chamber for your arrival. Do not stop, came the urgent reply. The habitat airlock was directly ahead now, and my hand trembled as I reached for the control to cycle the door. I couldn't shake the images replaying in my mind, the grotesque transformation that had overtaken poor Zara, the slithering tentacles that had reached for me, the terrible red light that had filled her eyes. It all seemed like some irrational nightmare, and I found myself wondering if I hadn't simply descended into madness. The comm unit in my suit crackled suddenly, and I flinched at the unexpected sound. Maya, you must not enter the habitat. I say again, do not enter the habitat. Dr. Emerson's voice was taut and rushed. What is it? I asked, my hand pausing on the airlock control. We're getting some anomalous readings from Zara's containment unit, he replied briskly, and we've had some anomalies on the exterior cameras. A knot formed in my gut. Anomalies? What anomalies? We're not sure, Dr. Emerson admitted, but something is wrong. Stand by until we can. His voice cut off abruptly, replaced by static. I fiddled with the comm unit, trying to re-establish the connection, but it was futile. The water around me seemed to grow cooler, the light dimmer, as I peered into the murky depths, straining to detect the slightest movement. The powerful lights from the exterior of the habitat cast long, flickering shadows as the flow ebbed and waned. Without warning, I felt something touch my leg, and I jerked backward, shying away. It has to be kelp, I told myself, my mind grasping for rational explanation. But then, the unmistakable touch of something living, something deliberate, wrapped around my ankle. Looking down, I forgot to breathe for a moment. A pale, encrusted hand, its skin blotched with lesions and growths identical to those I'd seen on Zara's mutated body, gripped me. As I stared in horror, more slender forms began to emerge from the depths below, reaching up toward me. "No!" I cried out, the sound muted by the water in my dive mask. I slammed my foot down as hard as I could, but it was futile. Somehow, impossibly, Zara had escaped her bonds and now floated before me, transformed, her unnatural hands reaching to draw me into the water with her. I panicked, my emotions spiraling into a frenetic, uncoordinated frenzy. The grip on my ankle tightened, and I was pulled lower into the water, a fresh wave of terror washing over me as I realized I had been outsmarted, outthought. I was the prey, not the hunter. Frantically, I fumbled to unclasp my weight belt, desperate to flee from whatever horror Zara had become. Before I could manage it, however, more hands gripped me, dragging me backward beneath the surface. The last thing I saw was the airlock entrance to the habitat as I was yanked downward into the cold depths, Zara's monstrous visage pulling me along. I paddled as fast as I could with my flippers, the grotesque undulation of Zara's body replaying in my mind, my heart pounding in my chest. My hands slapped against the exterior security panel, and with agonizing lethargy, the inner door began to iris open. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught the change in Zara's appearance as she approached, her eyes gleaming with something unearthly, a sickly green light that pierced the gloom. With the last of my strength, I yanked my trapped leg free and dove into the airlock, cracking my elbow painfully on the metal floor. Zara's altered form filled the doorway, appendages reaching for me. "Close!" I shouted, praying the voice-commanded system was still functioning. The iris began to contract slowly, the thing that Zara had become surging forward, half of its body thrusting through the opening as it narrowed. I scrambled backward, slipping on the slick floor, the monstrosity straining against the closing mechanism, its grotesque strength evident in the screeching of the protesting motors. For a terrifying moment, I was sure Zara would breach the room, but with a sickening wet thud, the iris sealed fully, bisecting the aberration with brutal efficiency. The air filled with an ear-splitting warbling shriek that echoed painfully off the metallic walls of the now-secured chamber, a sound that seemed to claw at my sanity. I lay on my back, breathing heavily, trembling uncontrollably, the water pouring from my diving suit creating rivulets across the floor. The silence that followed was deafening, a vacuum that amplified the chaos I just endured. Then, the pounding started wham, 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 a relentless drumming that shook the entire airlock. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it did little to muffle the sound, the blows vibrating through the floor, a testament to the proximity and vast strength of the thing outside. I rose shakily to my feet, stumbling over to the interior airlock controls, my fingers fumbling over the buttons in their cold, fearful state. "Come on," I muttered to myself as I punched in the decompression code sequence, the pounding from outside increasing in both volume and urgency. I could almost imagine those alien extremities pinching and probing at the minuscule gaps in the seal, breaching it. The thought set my teeth on edge. Finally, the inner door began to cycle open, and I practically fell inside, slapping the emergency close button as soon as I was clear. The airlock doors sealed again with a hydraulic hiss, and I stood there in the corridor of the habitat, dripping wet and shaking, the pounding continuing, muffled now by the heavy gauge of the hull but still relentless and terrifying. "Maya!" Dr. Emerson's voice shouted over the intercom. "What the hell is going on?" I opened my mouth to respond, but found no words. How was I supposed to explain what had happened to Zara? The metallic cacophony echoing throughout the habitat, a reminder that our problems were far from over. Whatever had affected her was still outside the airlock door, and no doubt still trying to get in. I feared that the airlock door would not hold it for long, the hammering and screeching a prelude to an inevitable breach. As the hammering and screeching at the airlock door lessened, I slumped against the inner wall, panting heavily, unable to believe what had just unfolded. Zara's horrific transformation and pursuit of me, the narrow escape at the airlock door. It all seemed surreal, a nightmare I couldn't wake from. But the aching of my muscles and the chill of the ocean water dripping from my suit were a convincing enough reminder that it had all been very real. With trembling hands, I stripped out of my diving suit, my mind a chaotic swirl of confusion. What had happened to Zara? How could she have changed so dramatically? I could still see her mutated form so clearly in my mind's eye. The image burned into my retinas. Dr. Emerson's voice over the intercom snapped me out of my thoughts. Maya, I need you in the lab now. I made my way through the corridors of the facility, aware of the anxious glances from some of my crewmates as I passed. News traveled fast in our isolated underwater outpost. When I entered the lab, Dr. Emerson was hunched over a bank of monitors, his face a mask of frustration and anxiety. Give me the full report, he demanded when I reached him. Haltingly, I recounted the nightmare, from Zara's holding cell to the ensuing chase, and Dr. Emerson listened intently, his brow furrowing deeper with every word. We're going to need to review Zara's data, he said when I concluded. It'll be the only way to understand what's happening and figure out a way to deal with it. Over the next couple of days, I reviewed as much of Zara's notes as I could find, most of it revolving around some unknown deep ocean phenomenon. I found multiple references throughout her notes regarding strange signals and anomalous energy readings that she couldn't explain. The more I dug, the more it became evident that Zara had spent a considerable amount of time analyzing this particular signal, trying to make sense of it. From what I could piece together, it seemed like this signal had been increasing in strength over time, along with some of the other peculiarities she had noted in the local fauna. On the third day, I called Dr. Emerson over. Take a look at this, I said, pointing to a series of spectrograms on my monitor. These signals that Zara recorded, they matched the frequency of the sound we heard in her tank. He leaned in closer, eyes wide. And the strongest of these signals correspond exactly with Zara's transformation. I finished for him, a chill running through me. The two of us locked eyes grimly. This signal seemed to be responsible for what happened to Zara. We had no idea where it came from or how widespread its influence had been. I turned my attention back to the data, determined to unravel the mystery before me, losing track of time as I dug deeper into Zara's files, piecing together the breadcrumbs she'd left behind. The more I delved, the more unnerved I grew by what I was finding. Zara's final entries were scattered and almost frantic in their tone, describing vivid dreams of vast drowned cities and incomprehensible entities. Was she losing her grip on reality, or had she discovered something real, something beyond our comprehension? A few days later, I stumbled across an encrypted document buried deep in Zara's personal archives. Took me hours to decode it, but when I finally decrypted the contents, my blood ran cold. Dr. Emerson, I called across the lab. Have a look at this. He hurried over and I played the video file for him. It was Zara and she looked scared. If you are watching this, then I have failed, she began. The signal is not just a broadcast. It is alive, it is sentient. It wants us. Zara described how she had come to realize that the signal was somehow changing her, manipulating her genes. She tried to resist it, to warn the others, but it was too strong. I can feel it in my mind now, she said softly, looking away from the camera. It's magnificent, terrifying, an intelligence vast and ancient, long before man walked the earth. And it is awakening. The playback abruptly stopped, and none of us could find words to speak. Dr. Emerson was the first to break the silence. Oh no, he said softly. What have we discovered? I stared at the frozen image of Zara on the screen, confusion reigning. We had come to the ocean floor in search of knowledge, but had instead unearthed something ancient and inexplicable. It had already taken Zara, and now sought to claim us as well. The walls of this structure suddenly felt woefully inadequate to the task of keeping the vast, crushing depths at bay. Somewhere out there in the darkness, Zara, or whatever she was now, awaited us. The rising tension within the habitat was reaching a fever pitch, and I found myself pacing anxiously, heart pounding. Where the hell was the rescue submersible? It felt like an eternity since I'd called for assistance from the directorate. My mind kept flashing back to the horrific transformation of Zara's features, and every shadow and creak of the metal superstructure set my nerves on edge. Finally, the calm voice of Dr. Emerson returned over the habitat's intercom with a muted beep. "Maya, the rescue submersible is on station outside of the habitat. It's time to get out of there." I exhaled the breath I'd been unconsciously holding and steeled myself for what needed to be done. The extraction plan was simple, if a bit terrifying. I was going to have to swim out to the submersible. There was no way we could risk allowing Zara access to the interior of the habitat. I stumbled to the airlock and retrieved my diving gear with trembling hands, the scuba tank feeling heavier than usual as I slung it over my shoulders. I double and triple-checked all my seals and connections. One mistake could mean my death. "Are you ready, Maya?" Dr. Emerson asked anxiously. "I'm ready," I replied softly. With a hissing rush of bubbles, the airlock doors opened inward, and water poured into the chamber. I looked around one last time at the habitat in which I'd spent the last few months. It suddenly felt claustrophobic, and I had to forcibly push aside the knowledge that something hostile now lurked out there, using this place as its hunting ground. The second set of doors parted, and I was staring out again into the massive, dim-lit ocean. The bright glare of the submersible lights provided some sense of security as they illuminated the open area, and nothing moved in the vast blue expanse around me. Kicking off from the airlock floor, I shoved my way out into the open water, reaching for the safety of the vessel. Stroke after stroke, I pulled myself along through the water, my heavy breaths loud in my ears, a bursting torrent of bubbles racing from the regulator with each exhalation. My focus remained locked on the sub, willing myself to swim faster. When I was halfway there, I felt the displacement of water behind me, and a rush of fear and panic seized me. I didn't need to turn around to know what it was. Something hard slammed into my back, and I was sent tumbling sideways through the water, dazed and terrified. Slim, powerful tentacles wrapped around my legs and began pulling me away from the safety I so nearly reached. Underwater, I twisted to face my attacker and found myself face to face with Zara. Her eyes glowing with that sickly green light even here in the depths, grotesque growths having erupted from her body, obscuring her once human visage. She pulled her lips back from multiple rows of razor-sharp teeth and emitted an ear-splitting warbling cry that vibrated through the water around us. I struggled against her grip, thrashing and twisting my body. One of my elbows connected with something solid, and her grip momentarily slackened. I pressed my advantage, pushing with all my strength, but Zara was faster and more at ease in the water than I, inexplicably undulating around me. She wrapped her tentacles around my arms, my torso, my neck. "Maya," I heard Dr. Emerson's anxious voice say in my earpiece. "What's happening?" I couldn't answer. I could only think about staying alive. Zara inched closer, that alien intelligence studying me with the faintest remnants of my friend's familiar features. We twisted and turned in the flood, the pulsating glow from the sub flickering with our revolutions. I knew if I lost it entirely, I was dead. With a desperate grunt, I managed to free an arm, my gloved hands scrambling along my waist, searching for the beacon. If I could activate it, there was a slim possibility the sub would home in on us. Zara must have realized what I was doing, and she let out another inhuman screech, redoubling her efforts to drag me down. I could feel myself sinking, the pressure mounting around us, my fingers closing around the device. I quickly triggered it, praying it would still work even though so much of my suit was covered in those alien growths. An ear-splitting keening filled the water, and Zara recoiled, her tentacles momentarily slackening. It was the chance I needed, and I kicked hard, driving myself upward. Zara was not so fortunate. As I turned to make my desperate swim to the surface, she had latched onto my ankle. I met her eyes once more, and for the briefest of moments, I thought I saw the Zara who was fearful and confused, somehow trapped within a body she could no longer control. But it passed, and she dragged me back down to the floor. I'm not sure how long I struggled with her, but my consciousness had already begun to ebb by the time the slow, unrelenting pressure of the deep began to overwhelm me. Her grip had been iron and inescapable, her grotesquely transformed body an ungainly tangle of living limbs that wrapped themselves around me. I could see the flickering lights of the submersible in the distance, a dim beacon of salvation that seemed to darken with every passing moment. My lungs were burning, desperate for air, and I knew I only had moments before I'd be forced to draw breath and fill my chest with seawater. In that panicked moment, I thought of the volcanic vents we had discovered during our surveys of this area weeks before. With the last of my strength, I kicked hard, dragging Zara and myself laterally toward the nearest vent. The water began to warm around us, slowly at first, then with increasing speed. Zara's grip relaxed slightly, her inhuman body beginning to spasm in the intense heat. I redoubled my efforts, my limbs protesting and cramping under the exertion. The water was now scalding, and I felt my suit start to fail in the extreme. Zara's tentacles thrashed wildly, her monstrous body unable to withstand the superheated water. The heat increased exponentially as we neared the vent, and I felt myself beginning to lose consciousness, dark spots dancing at the corners of my vision. I felt Zara's grip slackening even more, her inhuman body warping and bubbling in the superheated seawater. With a final desperate shove, I pushed us fully into the volcanic vent's outflow, and the world erupted in bubbles and scalding liquid. The alien scream from Zara's mouth echoed painfully in my ears, and in that violent moment, her grip upon me released completely. I swam desperately away from the vent and the writhing thing that had been my friend and colleague. Even through my darkening vision, I could see the mutant form of Zara's body caught in the violent outflow, her inhuman flesh seeming to liquefy and tear apart in the hellish heat. I drifted forward almost mindlessly, my thoughts muddled as my brain began to suffer from the hypoxia of insufficient oxygen flow, my ineffectual swimming carrying me slowly towards the lights of the submersible, each moment feeling like I was moving in greater and greater slow motion with the passage of time. Just as I was blacking out, I felt strong hands gripping me, and relief flooded through me. The submersible crew had reached me and were dragging me back into the safety of the vessel. I gasped great, ragged breaths as they removed my compromised helmet, my vision beginning to clear as I registered the concerned faces of my rescuers hovering over me. One of them, a grizzled veteran of deep-sea operations, shook his head and spoke gravely. "We got you out of there in time, but your friend, the thing, it's gone. The volcanic activity will destroy whatever's left of it. There's nothing left." I nodded weakly, not really processing everything he was saying as I lay there, breath coming in ragged gasps, my body trembling with the unbidden adrenaline that coursed through me. My foggy thoughts turned unbidden to the data files, the projections we had unearthed. Implosion, they had stated, and now the mutated form of Zara's body had been incinerated in the scalding waters of a submarine volcanic vent. As the submersible began its ascent to the surface, I was left to muddle through the horrors of the past hours and the loss of my friend, to the confusion that accompanied the realization of the fulfilled prediction. Whatever had occurred, the abyssal depths had claimed Zara and left me with little more than questions and a nagging sense of dread that I feared would haunt me for some time to come. What lies beneath the ocean's surface, waiting to emerge? Are you prepared to confront the unknown that dwells in its depths? Or will the shadows of this tale linger in your mind, urging you to turn back from the abyss?